Hey, what's going on, you guys? My name is the Raptor, and today we're going to be doing something that's a little bit different. Some of you guys may remember that I did a video talking about my top 5 death battles that I wanted to see happen in 2020 or in Season 7, and that got quite a bit of good reception, so I decided, why not? Let's do something similar. This video was originally going to be my top 5 best death battles, in my opinion, of course, along with my top 5 worst death battles, but when I started looking at the death battles I really liked, I noticed that my reasoning for why I liked them was pretty much the same across the board. Like, I liked the animation, or I liked the reasoning, or the analysis, or, the jokes, or something like that. So, I thought it would be kind of boring to try to tack it on to the worst death battles, in my opinion, because, I feel like that's a lot more interesting. If you guys want to see a separate video for my top 5 favorite, or my top 5 best death battles, you can leave it down in the comments below, and maybe I'll make that video later. But today, it's just time for me to count down my top 5 worst death battles. Now, I want to get it out of the way. I actually love death battles. They inspire me to do my own versus show on YouTube. So, please, this is not a hate video. This is just me giving some constructive criticism and talking about some videos that personally bug me and stuff like that, because I am trying to judge these videos objectively, but they're also just going to be mostly talking about individual problems that I have with the episodes. Some people might call that nitpicking, but I honestly think that these problems are too big and too risky that they ruin the video altogether. At least for me, they do. So again, this is all my opinion. These are just my worst death battles, or the ones that I just feel like don't really hit the mark like the other ones do. And again, no hate towards death battle. This is just my own opinions and my own thoughts, constructive criticism, all that stuff. This is all in good fun. Regardless, though, there are some death battles that really do bug me, so let's get started. So my number 5 pick for worst death battles is Rogue versus Wonder Woman. Now, in general, this video isn't gonna be me talking about, oh, this character should have won because this and this and this, because that's not really what this video is about. It's more so just critiquing the way that they do the episodes and stuff like that. But this one is probably the closest thing to that. And it's a simple reason why I don't like it, so that's why it's number 5 on the list. But I really, really, really don't think that Rogue would have any chance of beating Wonder Woman. To me, this demonstrates a really flawed understanding either of Rogue's absorbing powers or of Wonder Woman's power, or how powerful she is. Because there's a really fine line between who Rogue can beat and who she can't. The reasoning that they use, just that she can absorb the powers and, become more powerful than Wonder Woman, which, was not all the reasoning, but it was basically the main reason, right? Like, the reason that they used for that, like, you could basically apply that to any character, and with that reasoning, Rogue should be able to beat any character. But there's a really fine line between who Rogue should be able to beat and who she shouldn't be able to beat, and I feel that Wonder Woman is far on the side of who she shouldn't be able to beat, just because Wonder Woman is that powerful. In Thor vs. Wonder Woman, a death battle that came later, they went far more into detail of how powerful Wonder Woman actually is. And, she can move the earth with help from a couple of other heroes. She can fight at millions of times the speed of light, and that's just a low ball. And she has a sword that can cut through atoms, basically cutting through anything. Like, I don't know how Rogue should be able to stand up to that, even if she can absorb powers for skin-to-skin contact. Realistically, she shouldn't have the opportunity to be able to. And sure, she stole some of Carol Danvers' early powers, but that's still not nearly enough to be able to stand up to Wonder Woman. So again, to me, this really is either a flawed understanding of just how powerful Wonder Woman is, or they just thought, since Rogue can do this, she can absorb powers, she should just be able to beat any powerful character from DC, which just isn't true. She shouldn't be able to do that. And this is the 3rd episode, and there are some bad things about it, like the animation isn't great, like some other bad things about it, like the animation isn't great, and, they didn't go too much into detail about either of the characters. I kind of brushed that off, though. My main issue, though, was that even for that early in the game, I think they should have realized, that there really is a fine line between who Rogue can beat and who she can't, and for me, Wonder Woman is just someone that she really, really, really can't. But anyway, that's just my opinion. You're entitled to all your opinions. Let's move on. So my number 4 pick for worst death battles is Luke Skywalker versus Harry Potter. Now, to get this out of the way, I actually fully agree that Luke Skywalker would beat Harry Potter. I'm not here to say that Harry would win. I just have some problems with the way that this episode is set up and what they decided to do. Like, of course, I love both of these characters, and they didn't go into too much detail into either one, which kind of sucks. And again, the animation isn't amazing. There are some cool bits, even though there are some parts that really don't make sense to me, like how Luke Skywalker is able to force choke Harry Potter, and then somehow Harry Potter's able to shoot a magical blast, and then he goes back into the Force choking position. That seemed really weird to me. But my main issue with this episode is their post-analysis section after the animation ends, and how they explain why Luke would win the fight. The problem I have with it is that they don't explain why Luke would win the fight. They literally just recap everything that happens in the animation. They literally start off by saying, man, Harry did a surprisingly good job of keeping Luke at a distance, but Luke did this, but then Harry did this. Luke did this, though, and then Harry did this, but Luke won by doing this. And they literally just recap everything that happened in the animation. They really treat it like a simulation in this, saying that this is the way that the fight would go down. And I really don't like that, because the point of Death Battle is that they decide who wins, and then they make an interesting representation after they decide who wins. The animation is not supposed to decide who wins or loses, but this is really the only death battle where it feels like the animation somehow did decide who won and lost, you know? They didn't at one point say, Luke's advantages in this category and this category would overcome Harry's advantages in this category, and that's why Luke would win. They didn't once say that, and that's what you're supposed to do. They're supposed to prove why one character would win most of the time, and to me they just didn't do that. And sure, there's some parts of the reasoning, well, I don't even really feel comfortable calling it reasoning, but there's some parts during what they say where you can kind of pass it off as reasoning, like, oh yeah, his shatter point would be able to do this or whatever, but it doesn't really work for me, you know? They should have just, stuck to what they normally do and say the reasons why a character would win, not just recapping what happened in the animation. So I love both of the characters, and it just kind of bugs me that that's the way they went with it. But anyway, moving on. So my number 3 pick for worst death battles is Cammy versus Sonya. Now, I have some problems with this just in general. For instance, the animation to me is not very fun to look at. It's not very appealing. First of all, Cammy and Sonya look far different from each other. Like, Sonya looks way too pixelated, and they don't look comparable enough in terms of design, or the way they're designed, to really make it look like a quote-unquote realistic battle, you know? There are some cool bits in it, but there's really not too much to love about it, I feel. But the main issue I have with this, and I'm sure a lot of you guys know what I'm gonna say, but the main issue I have with this is that they use the Test Your Might Mortal Kombat mini-games in order to prove why Sonya would win, and why she has better strength, and why, she'd be able to overcome Cammy's durability. Now, I have a few problems with this, and everyone has problems with this. It's because Test Your Might is something that literally any character in the Mortal Kombat roster can do, so it's not a unique feat. It's not something that's in canon, really. It's not something that they should be using as feats, especially considering that I think that unless I'm getting something really wrong, that is Sonya's best strength feat by a long shot. She doesn't have any other feats, to my knowledge, that put her anywhere close to being able to exert 90,000 whatever the unit was. Regardless, it was far above Cammy's durability, which makes sense, because it's a solid steel anvil that she's cracking in half. But it doesn't make sense that they should use that as a real feat. And this is the same problem with... There's a similar problem that exists in Sub-Zero versus Glacius, where they do the same thing with Sub-Zero, and how he's able to crack like a titanium anvil, and he's able to overcome Glacius's defenses. But I feel like with Cammy versus Sonya, it's worse, because it actually starts to make you think that Cammy would win the fight. Here's what I mean. When it comes to Sub-Zero versus Glacius, there are some other strength feats, and based on scaling, I think it's reasonable to assume that Sub-Zero would at least be able to come close to those kinds of strength feats. Maybe I'm getting that completely wrong, but I still think that Sub-Zero would be able to pull off some very impressive strength feats, possibly enough to break through Glacius's ice armor. And the other thing is that they had a lot of other reasoning for it too to back up their argument. So I feel that makes sense too, that, even if he's not quite that strong, you still have other reasoning for why he would win. And it's pretty good reasoning in my opinion. But with Cammy versus Sonya, again, as I mentioned before, not only do I think that Sonya doesn't have any other feats that actually puts her to that high of a level, but then all the reasoning you're really left with afterwards is that, Sonya has more military experience over Cammy, which isn't a great argument. It's definitely not enough to win someone a fight. And then you also have that her arsenal, it might be too overwhelming. But then you start to think that if the arsenal is really the only thing that can actually put Cammy down, because Sonya doesn't have enough strength to overpower Cammy's durability, then that means she's really reliant on her arsenal when fighting Cammy. And considering that Cammy is faster and more agile, as they said, if she gets in close to Sonya, then Sonya might really be in trouble if her own strength isn't enough to actually kill Cammy. So to me, I feel like there's a way to reason out why Cammy would win, much easier than to say why Glacius would win against Sub-Zero, when disproving the Test Your Might feat. I don't know, I just feel like that's a really risky precedent to set, I guess. Is risky the right word? It's not a good precedent to set. Because then you might say, like, oh yeah, a minigame in, like, a random Marvel, app or whatever, that, and, like, Spider-Man does something that's ridiculously strong, they shouldn't use that, So yeah, that's really my biggest problem with it, and I'm sure a lot of you guys saw that coming. But anyway, moving on. So my number 2 worst death battle is Ben 10 versus Green Lantern. I'm sure a lot of you guys saw this one coming, because it's on, like, everyone's list for most hated death battles, but this is probably not for the reason that you guys might think. I actually quite like the animation in this fight, although I would have liked it to be a little longer and to be a bit more creative with Ben's aliens. And then, the pre-analysis I thought was actually pretty good for the characters for the most part. Of course, though, they really didn't do a good job of explaining why Green Lantern would actually win the fight. There are some parts that I think get a little overlooked. Like, I know why they're saying that Green Lantern would be able to survive a whole universe getting erased, because Kilowog was able to survive the retcon to the face or whatever, but I really don't think those two are comparable, so I don't like that argument anyway. But my biggest reason why I don't like how badly the post-analysis is done is that in a Death Battle cast episode, they actually have a whole episode dedicated to, answering the questions that fans had about Ben 10 versus Green Lantern, or the complaints, and they actually give a lot of good reasoning as to why Green Lantern would win. Now, I'm not here to say who I think would actually win this fight. I just know that a lot of people are upset about it, and I'm upset about it too, but I'm not here to say who I actually think would win this fight. That's not really what this is about. My main issue, though, is that they actually had their best arguments for why Green Lantern would win in a separate video. Why didn't you put it in the original video? They had, I think there was a guest or whatever who helped do it, but regardless, they had great arguments for why Green Lantern would win, and there were a ton of those arguments that weren't in the Death Battle video. And sure, it would have made the video really long, but you should still present your best arguments. You shouldn't have to make your audience go and find a completely separate video in order to hear your best arguments as to why a character would win. Because even if you do all the research and you realize, oh yeah, this character would win, you have to present your best arguments to the audience, or else the audience might not get it. And, I don't want to say this is exactly like this, because again, like, Ben 10 might win that fight. I don't really want to give my own opinion on that. But regardless, they shouldn't have to make people go and find a completely separate video in order to see their best arguments. You should present your best arguments in the best way possible where people are going to see it, in the actual video. So the fact that they actually had all this evidence and they didn't put it in the video, to me, that makes me think that they assume that their fans just know too much, or they know enough that they don't have to go too in-depth as to why a character would win. And that's just not true. Some people are getting introduced to Ben 10 or Green Lantern or both, just by watching this video. So you can't do that, You shouldn't have to make people go to a completely separate video in order to hear your best reasoning. That's really why I don't like it. I really, really don't like that they did that. But regardless, that's enough for that one. My number 1 pick for worst death battle, I'm going to do this very quickly, is Starscream versus Rainbow Dash. Now, this one is going to probably surprise a few people for why this is my number 1 worst, and I guess if I had to sum it up in one sentence, it's that this is a joke fight gone too far. And here's what I mean by that. There are some joke fights where they just have it as, double KO, or, like a draw or whatever. Or you might have some inconclusive victories. Or you might even have one where, like, a character, like Yoshi versus Riptor, where the character that you don't initially expect to win, they might win. And you can still kind of reason out why that character would win, at least it's possible for them to win, even if you don't fully agree with their reasoning for why Yoshi would beat Riptor. But for this one, they actually went against their own rule in Death Battle that the loser has to die in order to make the episode funny, or in order to make it really like a joke fight, Because Starscream can't die. That's his spark is his life force, you know? He can't die, and yet they still made Rainbow Dash win anyway, you know? So to me, that's a joke fight gone too far, because they shouldn't go against their own rules for the sake of making a joke fight. To my knowledge, this is the only one they've done, and I really don't like it. Usually they're really good with their joke fights, but this one was it just went too far, you know? I really hope that in the future, and for the most part they've been doing this well, but I really hope in the future they don't make joke fights go to the point where they actually go against their own rules, because to me, I can never take this episode seriously, because Starscream should not be able to die against Rainbow Dash, but whatever, that's just me. Anyway, guys, that's really it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like, comment, subscribe, all of that good stuff, whatever you want to do. You can leave in your thoughts what death battles you liked, what death battles you didn't like, anything you want. And yeah, that's it for me. I guess that's the end of the video. I will see all of you guys in the next video. Peace out.